welcome to episode 18 of the Legal and General Just Covered podcast, where we listen to advisors' views and opinions and hints and tips in the intermediary space. My name's Wayne.
And I'm Hazel, and we're really excited today to be joined by James Hindley from Embrace Financial Services. So welcome, James. How are you today?
Yeah, not bad. Thank you very much.
Good. No, we're excited to have you. So tell us a bit about your background and what brought you into industry.
Yeah, so I was in sales, sales up in the retail sort of industry to begin with, and I had this opportunity to do life insurance sales, telephone based. And I'd never done anything like it before, but I thought, well, it sounds exciting. The money looks good. See what I can do, and that's where I started. Really, just dealing with life insurance leads online. People going in and putting their details. I want this, calling up, and then converting that initial lead, giving some advice to see if we could upsell critical illness cover, income protection, and even the policies that were available that they hadn't thought about or hadn't been aware of. And that's how I started.
Wow. It's interesting and probably a common way of people to come into the industry, especially from retail, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you come in fairly green, you get sort of trained up and stuff. How did that work? How did you sort of ease yourself in? Did you have mentors? Did you have support from people as part of that organisation that you joined?
Yeah, so during my time there was two people in particular who took me under their wing and really helped. You could see that I had for potential, but not necessarily for confidence to do it. And I think the important part was I had the integrity to be able to do it. No, it's not a shortcut. I don't think, especially with financial sales. You know, I think if you sell somebody a telly which is too big for their living room, then it's not the end of the world for that side. You know, but you sell them for wrong. You don't talk about critical illness cover. It means it's a big difference, you know. And I think there's not a shortcut to get quick sales in protection for that side. So I had two people who looked after me, and then the guy who ran the company itself was particularly, he'd done a lot of work on NLP, a lot of work on insights. I've listened to Zig Ziglar videos and things like that, and he was constantly one day we came in and he'd got an iPod mini, one of small little clip ones, and he got one for everybody, and he'd filled it full of the audio books to recorded on all that for everybody to listen to. That's
quite forward thinking, isn't it? If you think about it, back then, using an iPod, packing it full of knowledge and audio books or audio clips, or that type of thing. A bit similar to the way we're sharing the information that we have advisors on this particular podcast, isn't it? Getting it out there, but obviously people nowadays are much more likely to and do as part of everyday lives to actually seek out podcasts and other ways of digital sort of sharing of learnings and all that type of thing. So that particular individual, those individuals, how important were they in your development as you moved forward?
Yeah, really good. I didn't realise what I was doing there the training I had was really good until I left and went to work somewhere else. And you interact with people who've been doing the job many, many more years longer than I have, who had half of the knowledge that I did about products, about how to talk to people, about different way of doing it. This is how I do it. It's the only way I do it. And I was like, well, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I can I was passing this knowledge on the other way. And I thought, I'm meant to be learning from you guys. You guys have much more experience. But I've got this new approach I'm looking at, and it just made me highlight actually there's a lot of, sometimes there can be a lack of knowledge from people. People don't want to keep learning. I've learned how to do it. I don't want to do any more learning from now on.
I think that's a really key thing in the industry though, isn't it? Because protection products change slightly over time, but fundamentally the reason for that product remains the same, doesn't it? Is that you've got a financial risk or you've got a need there, and how do we ensure that risk's mitigated? But I guess the actual customer at the end is always evolving, isn't it? As generations change and as people start coming up through financial services, we're always going to have different customer bases who prioritise different things, and that ongoing learning is just so important. And we did a bit of research called The Secrets of Protection Success, and we looked at what makes a top advisor really, really good at what they do. And one of the things that came out of that research was ongoing learning, because actually you can be incredibly well versed at your products, incredibly well versed at the knowledge of underwriting, all these things, but as you said, it's that communication piece that is the difference between success. I mean, success or not. Like one sentence within that appointment could be what the difference is between getting that customer on board or not, isn't it? So.
Yeah, there's no shortcuts. With regards to that, and you have to do everything every time because you don't know what is going to be the thing that's most important to that person. If you don't talk about trusts, that could have been the thing that made you different from the next person. You could have spoke to 5 people, nobody spoke about trusts. You do. They go, well, why hasn't anybody? You're not telling them, but they will go away thinking, well, why has nobody else spoken about this? This person knows what they're talking about. And I think that's really key. And I think I learned that throughout. I found that you said about the customer journey changing and evolving, and I found that when I started, we used to sell life insurance, and then all of a sudden some of our competitors were going, well, this life insurance has got waiver of premium on it. All right, so we'll talk about waiver premium and we'll talk about trusts, and then it was those little bit extra bits that we were adding on, which made I know more than the person. Somebody else you go and speak, I know more than them. You may not need everything, but I know more than them, and therefore you should trust me. That's why it's worth coming to me and paying that £1 more or 50p, whatever it might be difference, with regards to how things move forward.
And we've seen products change, as we've already mentioned, particularly like critical illness and all that type of thing, bells and whistles, add on extra benefits and such like. But as clients change, that way, obviously, reliance or use of social media. So in terms of how you're interacting with those customers, I suppose, to have all of those different tools in your toolbox, if you like, in your kit bag, it is really important to be able to flex that.
Absolutely. And it's depending on the client, you're going to change how you approach it anyway. You still cover the same parts, but you know that you're having when I'm talking about the potential of claims, I'm talking to a 22-year-old, I'm going to be talking about a different, I think one of the key for me has always been stories. I think that's the best way to explain how a product works is stories. That's always been the best way. So I will talk about the friend of mine who picked his daughter up from hospital and had a car accident, and his daughter was absolutely fine, but he was in a coma for a month. Had no memory of that is what that is probably more for young families. I would mention that. I will talk to I will talk about the clients who, a friend of mine at 50 was diagnosed with testicular cancer, found it very early, and I'll talk about maybe for people older, it's a similar sort of age brackets to what these stories are, and these are all true stories that we use, that I use. They're not made up stories; they're real stories. But I don't tell the same story to the same person. If that makes sense, it's a different story depending on who I.
Yeah, and we're massive advocates at L&G about storytelling. Yeah. And what I love about what you're talking about there is you're using those different stories for different customers. You're not just, for want of a better way of describing it, wheeling out the same story to different people.
Yeah, when I worked at a company before, we had to tell a story. We had to tell the same story every single time. And it became a joke in the office that we kept expanding it. We kept expanding this story and making it almost unbelievable with how we kept expanding, just because we got bored of saying the same story. It's the same story, and you sat quiet in the office, you could almost get, if time for calls right, you could have 4 or 5 people saying exactly the same thing at the same time, and it was like a parrot. So the stories, we evolved it to make it more and more, expanding how we spoke about it. Because it wasn't a real story to us. It wasn't something that meant anything. It was just, you've got to say it tells this story. When actually I found that using the stories, that I know people who've used these policies. I've had really horrible conversations with people who've had to make claims, to be told of somebody I've known for years that, I've been diagnosed with cancer. It's a terrible conversation to have. Even if you've done everything right and they're going to get their payout and treatments, it's still an awful conversation to have. So when I then talk to people, it means more. It means more because I know I'm not just making a story up that a marketing team has come up with and go tells this story. I'm giving them real stories about people I know.
It's sincere.
Yeah.
It's credible, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of, and I suppose makes you feel like you are really on that journey to making a difference for each and every client when you're talking to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those experiences that you had, did that happen whilst you were advising or before?
Whilst I was advising, yeah.
And do you think that changed your natural take on what you were doing?
Yes.
and heightened the importance of it?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think beforehand it was, you did it because you knew that it was the right thing to do. You did it, but now it's like, well, I'm telling you these. I've seen the other side of it. I have, took maybe 15 years of advising before I knew anybody had claimed on any of these policies. The only people I knew who had been ill were old people, were grandparents and people like that. But to suddenly know people who have a car accident, well, hang on, that can happen to anybody. Somebody who's 50, diagnosed with cancer, that's a scary story. People knowing people who've had this accident or have been diagnosed, it makes a big difference. A friend of mine from university, went in just before Christmas, went in for a routine operation and didn't wake up and passed away. And he was 42 years old, and that, it was a complete mindset change. It really can happen. It isn't just a stat or a statistic. I think it's these drill stories, and I try and put that across when I talk to people, with how I speak to people. This is something that's really important. This is, and these reasons why. And I think that's been a change of, definitely for the last 5-10 years. Has been a big change where all of a sudden I've started to see these real stories. They're not just somebody else's stories passed to me. They're my stories. And that's really important.
And that passion is obviously loud and clear from there. That conviction, probably from what, as Hazel raised, what you've been through, those stories you've actually seen. So taking it back to sort of the beginning of a client interaction, where does the protection journey, where does the subject of it, where does that start for you?
So for me, it's on the introduction, the IDD, going through that on the call. When I've been to places where the IDD is, here's the IDD, there are a couple of high points, and that's it. Where actually the feature benefit, and explain throughout that process. And it's the very first, when I talk about people, what I do for them. We do mortgages, we deal with a range of mortgages, we do insurance, and then it's there, and I explain what options are available to them, and explain how we will have this conversation and why it's important. And I will tell them quite often at the start, you don't have to have anything. You can tell me today, and when we speak on the second call, when we go ahead and move forward, you can tell me that I'm not going to die, I'm not going to get ill, and I'm not going to get sick, right? For the next 35 years, I'm happy to bet my house on it. And I go, fine, look, you sign this form, say I've had the conversation, I've told James I'm happy to take these risks, then fine, but we're having this conversation.
I love that positioning, that I'm happy to put my house on it. How friendly, it just makes it sound so friendly and down to earth, because quite often we'll see, you hear of disclosure documents and things like that, and I think that's a really important part, as you said, the customers then taking ownership, especially under consumer duty, that actually the customer's fully understood, they're taking the ownership, you've explained the risk. But I think wording it like that is so lovely, and it makes it really quite real, doesn't it?
You understanding, don't you? Because obviously it's a regulatory document, it's got to be done, you've got to outline all the elements as part of it, great, but also what you're using in that description there. You didn't use the word protection once, and we've done some research, haven't we, a few years back now, where we've looked at, and I think it was something like 5% or whatever of customers, when you say the word protection, they don't think of anything, and there's a whole host above that, like steel toe cap boots and high-vis jackets that they think of when you use that word rather than anything else. But you're articulating that in a way that customers are going to understand, and that is the whole root of consumer duty, amongst other things as well, in terms of having the right outcomes. Customers get the concept from the off.
To begin with, I'm not talking about income protection, I'm talking about extended sick pay. It's a way of explaining how the policy works, rather than having to explain, this is income protection, it does this, and this. It's no hand. So at the moment, you've got 6 months full pay. Brilliant. What happens on month 7? Okay, would it be a nice idea that on months, if you were off longer than month 6, from 7, 8, 9, that there was your sick pay could continue? yes, and that's how I do it. That's how I sort of present it. So I'm the income protection solution to covering beyond that point, and that's how it's best described.
Yeah, that's a really lovely way to describe it, and I think that's definitely something that, I don't know if your opinion is, comes with time and confidence. As you mentioned confidence right at the very start of your journey into getting used to selling the life cover as an initial, and how you at first it was a confidence building task. Do you think that's again, confidence, a really, really important part, finding that language and finding your own stamp on things?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen to the people who do the job very well. There's everybody you speak to can teach you something. I think everybody can teach you something. Not everybody's always willing to share, but a lot of people go, yeah, it's quite. And you can just sit there in a room. And I sat in a call centre when I started, and you go, what that person says is really good. And I think if you just copied it doesn't work. You've got to go have a chat with that person and say, could you explain the thought behind what you've said and why you've said it? Because I think anybody can say for words, but if you don't understand why you're saying those words, it's like acting, isn't it? Anybody can just read a script, but if you've got to understand where that's coming from and understand that. And I think it's the same with when talking about protection. There's lots of really good people out there, and I've worked with some amazing people, so I've gone, well, that bit really works. I don't think I could say what he's saying because that doesn't fit my personality, but I can use that from this person, I can take that from this person, and that's what gives you the confidence that you're saying something's congruent because it's yours. And I mean, that's really key. And as I said, there's always lots of people you can copy, steal, whatever you want to say, ideas from, and go, yeah, that person knows what they're talking about.
I think with regards to development, anyone new coming into the industry, I think that's really, really crucial that you highlight the point that you can take things from people, understand the reason why they're asking those questions, take bits from others, but ultimately make it your own. Yeah. And that's what you've done. So in doing that, and the mindset element you said is so important now, well, what point did you sort of become sort of knowledgeable or actually realise the fact that, I need to get my mind in check here in order to move things forward?
Yeah, I think it was very early on when I first started. It was very much with the NLP. It's all about mindset. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. That's a really common thing we spoke about. It's about how do you get there? Because I've always been somebody who, I care, so I worry when things haven't gone right, or what could I have done better? Have I let that person down? Have I done what I should have done? Or...
And so many people think like that, don't they? How many times do you think, oh, no, I should have done that, I should have done this? And how did you approach that? How did you get over that?
Yeah, well, I think it was I think it's just a case of you've just got to know that you're doing the right job. And if you do, there's no shortcuts. So if you do everything every time, and sometimes it's not always going to work. When I first started, my one of the first managers told me, look, there's a third of the people you speak to, whatever you tell them, they'll do exactly what you tell them to do. There'll be a third of people, you can tell them everything be the best, you can be on your best, everything you say is absolutely perfect, they'll just ignore you. They're just people who just do not want to listen. But it's that third in the middle, to become a really good advisor, it's that third in the middle, who's if you do a good job, you will convert them to help to come towards you. And that's where you realise that sometimes there will be people, you can tell them everything you need to possibly know, and they'll just go, no, I'm not listening. I don't want to know, I'm not interested. But there'll be that third of people who you speak to, who you do a good job, you convince them, you get them to understand, by getting them to understand, you then convince them that, I will listen to what you've got to say.
And they will stay with you, won't they? Yeah. They will keep coming back, and they'll remember what you've done and why you've done it.
And they're the most satisfying people to deal with sometimes, where, if somebody says, I've had it before, and it took me a while to even realise that when I've sat down with people and I've said, this is what I've recommended to you, and they've gone, brilliant. And I've gone, what? Are you sure? I've got some cheaper options for you. I've got some other, where... And that's almost too easy. And
you didn't even have to do the features, advantages, and benefits.
No, they just gone, this is what I recommended, and that's fine, James, we're happy with that. And I've either done a really good job earlier on, and they're just happy to. But then sometimes, well, hang on, if if they haven't got any questions about it, how do they fully understand it? So actually, when you get those people who are in the middle and you've gone, this is what, okay, well, I like what you've got to say, but, okay, well, what's the important part to you? And sometimes, budget is important. That's got to be important. I'd rather somebody took out a policy for £50 a month and we speak in 4.5 years' time and they've still got it, than take out a £100 a month policy and it's cancelled in a year down the line because they've forgotten why it's important to them, or they've just done it because, they've just gone, well, yeah, okay, I'll do that, that's fine, whatever. And that's a better way of having it, having people really understand so they can care about it. That's great when you can talk about people, when you speak to them in 4.5 years' time, yeah, we did this, can you remember why we did it? And if they can tell you why they've done 4 years down the line, 4.5 years down, 2 years later, why they did what they did, that's great.
That's amazing.
That's really good.
In terms of aiming for something like that, for them to be able to tell you, that is amazing. And then thinking about it now in a post-consumer duty world where customers we want that understanding to be there to be able to make that informed decision, which is right for them. Some people are going to go, oh, that's brilliant, we'll take it. And others will require further explanation and understanding, won't they? Yeah. But I think that if you're aiming for that, for them to be able to play that back to you and the why they took it is just...
I think that mindset piece again coming in there, it's really interesting because when you said you had some customers, you'll package it all up and you'll be almost like pleasantly surprised that there's no challenge. It took me back. I had a case when I was advising, and it was a pilot fight in the RAF, so you can imagine the premium for that was I think it was like £230 a month or something just for fairly basic cover, but I can remember getting it all put together to present back to him and thinking, oh, he's never going to take this. And actually it was the exact same situation. He went, well, I've seen how valuable life is, I will absolutely take that for my family, there's no question about it. And it was really, really funny. But I think sometimes that's where, isn't it, as advisors, we need to catch ourselves, because our concept and expectation of what's expensive or what is valuable will be completely different to the person sat across the table from us, isn't it? And that's really interesting. So how have you over time thought about that? And then when we think about that budget conversation, that cost conversation, how do you approach it and how do you make sure that your biases stay put?
It's still hard. You still catch yourself looking and going, oh, I wouldn't pay I don't want to pay that, or rather I wouldn't want to, rather than I wouldn't. I think that's another way, a way of thinking about it. But I think you've just got to you've got to, you talk about it before, and I've done a couple of different ways. So I've done it one way I feel successful. It really just depends on the client, because you can get different buying from different people. I found when I'm doing mortgage and protection, if I do the whole budget and we then talk about for protection first. So you've told me your budget is £1,200 a month. I've got this policy. Well, good news is the mortgage and you're fully protected all comes in for £1,200 a month. What a great idea. Fantastic. Right, let me tell you about for protection. This comes to £200 a month. Oh, that's expensive. Hang on. Remember you told me your budget was £1,200. Let's come to the mortgage. I'll explain what the mortgage does, and then we talk, and then we go, and again at the end, it all comes to £1,200, and they go, well, yeah, that does that all comes together, that. So they think of it so they can combine for two. I think that's a good way of doing it, and also it's about that confidence. You've, Mr. Client, you've told me that you want this cover because your children, or even you name for children, you can name for children because of this. You want to make sure that your wife has a home. They haven't come to you, they've come to you to get a mortgage, but what you're doing is getting them a home. And if you can, and you talk about the home, not paying off a mortgage, you talk about your family can stay in the home, and you can explain all these benefits that they've told you on that first call. When you talk about the policies, like, this is what this £200 a month, this £100 a month, whatever it might be, is giving you all this peace of mind, and I think that's the best way to do it.
And that education piece that you're talking about there, do you find that, obviously with lots of different types of customers you come across, do you still find it is a big education piece in that regard about what exactly you're covering and why you're recommending what you're recommending?
Yes, I think so. I think there is. I think life insurance is fairly, and I think everybody's probably heard of it, and you'll see about the side, but I don't necessarily think there's always great press out there about what are these other policies what these policies do. You don't, it sounds risky, but you don't see a TV show where somebody's off sick and they've got their insurance policy in place. If they're off sick, it's a plot point because, oh no, they can't afford to pay their bills, or if somebody's got a large life insurance policy, it's like, oh, this is why this particular character's got a large amount of money because of this reason. There's always a reason for life insurance, but there's never about anybody being sick. It's always a negative side behind it. No, never. Well, actually, these policies were. Oh, hang on. Oh, that's how those policies work. Maybe I should find out about those kind of policies.
That's a really interesting concept, actually, because in a lot of books or a lot of storylines, a lot of plots, it'll be like, oh, somebody's been murdered, or the husband or wife's after life insurance, isn't it? And it makes it really real, and people can see the impact. But you're right. There's I'll give away my guilty pleasures here, but there's a Coronation Street storyline at the moment where, he's got motor neurons disease, and it's exactly that. There's no mention of cover, but even at the end of the programme, it'll come up and it'll say, here are all the resources that you've got available, government, etc. But there's nothing that says, actually, if this happened to you, maybe be speaking to speak to a financial advisor ahead of time. So there's a lot of lack of education in the wider market, isn't there, and wider society of what people can do.
And the life insurance is obviously, I remember being taught in training once about when Cold Feet, when the character got ran over at the end of it, suddenly life insurance sales the next day went up huge. People went, oh, it's a popular programme, somebody's died. So all of a sudden, the life insurance, but there isn't for most people, and it's their job, isn't it? It's their job to get that into people you speak to make it part of their conversation and understand it. Because I don't think it is out there in the wider world, and I don't think it always helps. Sometimes you get, journalists talking about, well, you should take out income protection, but critical illness covers rubbish. It doesn't pay out. Income protection is better. It's like, you shouldn't be. You should always be about the positive. If anything, you don't need anything to give these people a reason not to do it. Well, this person said you shouldn't do it. It should always be about positive, about because till you make a claim, you don't know what you're not going to do. What's important.
It's like you see, I guess, a natural advert is all the GoFundMe pages, isn't it? Which is horrifically sad when you see the situations that some people are in and that they're struggling and raising money for family. But I almost wish that GoFundMe could have something in it. It's like, well, here's the alternative. In case you're ever worried about this, there are alternatives to doing that. And I think there's definitely, as you said, you do in appointments need to spend a bit extra work on the income protection, critical illness.
And I think that's why you talk about extended sick pay. That's why you talk about, you don't want to, if something worse was to happen, do you want a financial crisis at the same time as a health crisis? Well, no, of course I don't. If something worse was to happen, a line I always say, money doesn't stop bad things from happening, but it gives you options, and those options can make a difference. I'm sure there'd be a study somewhere about it, but I imagine people who have claimed on a critical illness policy and can pay their mortgage off and can concentrate on getting better, or people who have claimed on an income protection policy and could be looked after long term and not go back to work too early with a bad back and have them be off sick again. I imagine those people have a better journey back to health than the people who've got, not only are they worried about being ill, being horribly injured or whatever it might be, but also paying my bills.
Well, that's where critical illness cover was formed, wasn't it? It was like Dr. Bernard. He was a South African surgeon, wasn't he? And that was the study he did, was his patients who he personally found, his patients who didn't have financial troubles and could stay off work for longer recovered faster than the ones that couldn't. So he invented the first form of critical illness cover. So it's interesting that critical illness cover wasn't designed by an insurance industry. It wasn't actually designed by banks, building societies. It was a doctor who recognised that. And again, it's interesting what you say. If we did a study nowadays in the modern world, how different that would potentially come out, because again, we've now got mental health a massive part as well, isn't it? And people are far more astute to actually financial health really links to mental well-being, which links to physical health, and keeping all of that balanced.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something I've seen in applications, that when I started, 1 in 20 people may have said, oh, from anxiety or something like that, and they were quite embarrassed by talking about it. But now I would say, if in a week, probably one person a week I would speak to, and it's a common thing that people have, and people are more open to talk about this sort of stuff. And therefore, how much better if they'd had something in place that they could take that time to properly recover. I've had people who've had to completely change their jobs because the job they were looking at just isn't. I need to change my industry. I need to get out of this because of the stress of just life, I suppose. And and there are options there that can help people.
And stress is huge nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you find now people are more open in those conversations to look at things? Because I love that line you've just said. I've got to say it is, do you want a financial crisis as well as a health crisis?
Yeah.
I just thought that was an amazing line. Hadn't heard that one before, and we've heard a lot. So that was absolutely great. But are you finding more people are open because they've got more conditions? They're more, like the mental health thing, they're more likely to raise it and share it. Are they then more akin to the options and the concept of?
Yeah, I think so. Especially, when, like I said, if people have had claims or they've had time off, but mental health especially, people are more willing to go. Yeah, I can. Like I was quite lucky, or I've had no time off work, but actually, if this condition gets worse or something was to change in the future, I need to have something in place as outside because, and then if you haven't had something, they know somebody who has. They've worked with somebody who's had, normally fit and healthy person who has had 6 weeks off work because of stress or something along those lines, and it doesn't take a lot to knock somebody off their kilter.
I think that's where the wellbeing support comes in as well, doesn't it? Because it's and it's great that all providers across the industry have really moved in a way to think, well, how can we offer more than the policy as a kind of preventative? Because nobody wants to get to that point anyway, do they? So having those added value services definitely helps. Do you find you bring them into your conversations? How does that go?
Yeah, so what I try and talk about is, because ideally, I want to recommend somebody to take out £100 a month policy and never use it. So actually, look, you're paying for this in place. However, these are things you can use every single day. These are some of the benefits that can benefit you and your family. This all of a sudden, that critical illness policy is a family policy. It's not just for mum and dad. It's the whole family are protected. I think that really came in with Prue Protect when they first came in, and they said, here's some cinema tickets, check out live shows. And they sort of evolved and moved away from, but that idea of here's something that people can actually use every day and have a benefit from. I think the more the industry goes towards that, then I think that will be, then people get to go, I don't want to get rid of this policy because I've benefited from this, and this. It's not just, I've got some life insurance attached to that, but if they really buy into those benefits, then that's obviously really, then the life insurance and the critical illness, they're the extras alongside it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think we definitely see when customers engage with those added value services, they are far less likely to cancel because they then see the day-to-day, as you said, that day-to-day value, which is so important.
Yeah, isn't it? It's making it real for them throughout the journey of the policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah. What a brilliant podcast.
Yeah, I know. It's been, as I said, it makes you think about all the times when I was given advice. I could have used some of those hints and tips.
Can we go back in time?
If we had to summarise it then and think about what would be your kind of key bit of advice to advisors listening to this, would there be one thing that you would say absolutely stands out to you that you would advise others to think about when doing their conversations?
I think for me, I think there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts, but there is easier ways to be successful. So, talk to other people in your industry. It's very easy. It can be very lonely sitting in your office or working from home or whatever, especially since the pandemic, of just locking yourself away and just thinking that, what am I doing? So there's lots of people out there there's lots of things like these podcasts and things like that where you can listen to people happily going, here's a really good tip, listen to this. And you don't have to change everything, but you can pick something up. If you pick up one thing every time you listen to something, that's going to be really important. That will make a difference. And it's that mindset, I think, of just going, I'm going to do the best to this person. We're going to have this conversation, and your conversation may not be brilliant this time, but next time it's going to be better, and it's going to be better next time. And if you keep doing what's right for that customer, then the rewards will come to you. I think if you are very transactional with people. You know, if you chase money, it runs away. You know, if you're thinking what's best for this person, short term and long term and medium term, then that person will be a customer for life, and that's what you want. You want somebody to speak to every year, every couple of years, and keep coming back to you because they trust you.
Oh, well, thank you, James. It's been truly lovely speaking to you.
Thank
and
you
I
very
think
much.
the thing that I absolutely adored about that episode was your really subtle use of language that absolutely changes the whole concept of the conversation in a positive way. So thank you for sharing all your tips with us. That was brilliant.
Thank you for being so enthusiastic and
all right,
passionate
thank you.
and sincere with it as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you.